The evidence behind the Bible. The life of Joseph and Moses in the ancient Egypt. The exact origin of the Israelite people is a matter of debate among scholars, but there are several theories. The biblical account traces the Israelites back to the patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who are said to have lived around 2000 to 1800 BCE. The name, Israel, is first mentioned in the Bible in the book of Genesis, where it is said to have been given to Jacob after he wrestled with an angel. However, in terms of historical evidence outside of the Bible, the first clear mention of the Israelites comes from a victory inscription of the Egyptian pharaoh Merneptah, who reigned from around 1213 to 1203 BCE. The inscription refers to a group of people called Israel, who were defeated by the Egyptians, suggesting that the Israelites were already a recognizable group by that time. Archaeological evidence such as pottery and other artifacts also suggest that a group of people who were likely early Israelites lived in the highlands of Canaan during the Late Bronze Age, around the same time as the Merneptah stele. Based on the genealogy in the Bible, it is estimated that Joseph lived in Egypt during the 19th century BCE, around 1876 BCE. Pharaoh gave Joseph the Egyptian name Zaphanath-Paneah, Genesis chapter 41 verse 45, and his wife's name was Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, a priest of On, Genesis chapter 41 verses 45, 50. The Bible does not provide a specific date for when Joseph ruled in Egypt. Many scholars and historians estimate that Joseph lived during the Second Intermediate Period of Egypt, which is associated with the Hyksos dynasty. The Hyksos were foreign rulers who conquered Egypt and ruled parts of it from about 1650 to 1550 BCE. It is possible that Joseph served under the Hyksos rulers during this time. This is based on the idea that the Hyksos were a Semitic people who may have had connections to the Israelites. Some scholars suggest that Joseph could have been a high-ranking official in the Hyksos court, or that he may have even been a Hyksos king. In the Bible, another way to estimate the time of Joseph is if we date back 430 years from the time of Moses, which is around 1446 BC, then we arrive at around 1876 BC as the time of Joseph's rule in Egypt, which is well before the time of the Hyksos in Egypt. The identity of the pharaoh during the time of Joseph in Egypt is a matter of debate and uncertainty. There is no clear consensus on the name of the pharaoh mentioned in the Bible, and historical records from that time are incomplete and often contradictory. During the period of 1991 BC to 1839 BC, 12th dynasties ruled Egypt. Here is a list of some of the significant pharaohs of 12th dynasties. 1. Amenemhat I, 1991 to 1962 BC. 2. Seneret I, 1962 to 1917 BC. 3. Amenemhat II, 1917 to 1882 BC. 4. Seneret II, 1888-1878 BC. 5. Seneret III, 1878 to 1839 BC. If Joseph's time is around 1876 BC, then it was the time of Seneret III who ruled Egypt from 1878 BC to 1839 BC. During the reign of Seneret III, the religion of Egypt was centered around the worship of a pantheon of gods, including Ra, Amun, and Osiris, among others. Seneret III was a strong supporter of the traditional religion and was known for his extensive building projects, including the construction of numerous temples dedicated to various gods. He was also known for his military campaigns and expansion of the Egyptian Empire, particularly into Nubia and the Levant. There is some evidence to suggest that the biblical account of the Israelites living in Egypt and specifically in the region of Goshen may have some basis in historical fact. Some ancient Egyptian texts and inscriptions mention groups of Asiatic or Semitic people living in Egypt, including the Amu, which is the Egyptian word for Asiatics, and the Shasu, a nomadic group that may have included some of the ancestors of the Israelites. Additionally, archaeological evidence from the eastern delta region of Egypt, including the site of Tel el-Dabaa, has revealed the presence of a large number of Canaanite or Semitic-style artifacts and structures from the Late Bronze Age, which may be evidence of a substantial Canaanite or Semitic population living in Egypt during that period. However, the exact details of the Israelites' time in Egypt as described in the Bible, including their enslavement and subsequent exodus, are the subject of ongoing scholarly debate and remain difficult to verify with certainty. Monotheism in ancient Egypt is an interesting topic, as it is not clear whether or not the ancient Egyptians practiced monotheism in the same way as the Abrahamic religions. However, there are some examples of Egyptian pharaohs who attempted to impose a form of monotheism, most notably during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten, 1353 to 1336 BCE, of the 18th dynasty. Akhenaten, c. 1353 to 1336 BCE, famously introduced the worship of the sun disk Aten as the sole god and moved the capital to a new city called Akhetaten. Moses, on the other hand, was born several generations later, around 1391 BCE. However, it is important to note that these dates are based on calculations and estimates, and there is some degree of uncertainty regarding the exact timeline. According to the Bible, the Israelites were enslaved in Egypt for several centuries before being led out by Moses, which would place the Exodus around the 13th century BCE. However, the Merneptah stele, which mentions the Israelites, dates to the late 13th century BCE, suggesting that the Israelites were already a distinct group by that time. Some scholars reconcile this discrepancy by proposing that the story of the Exodus may be a composite of multiple historical events and oral traditions, rather than a single event that can be dated precisely. Others suggest that the biblical account may be a symbolic representation of the Israelites' struggle for liberation and their covenant with God, rather than a historical record. It's worth noting that while there is currently no archaeological evidence to support the biblical account of the Exodus, this does not necessarily mean that the Exodus did not happen. The absence of evidence could be due to a number of factors, such as the difficulty of finding and interpreting ancient remains, the limited scope of archaeological excavations, or the possibility that the events of the Exodus were not significant enough to leave a clear trace in the archaeological record. According to the Bible, the time of the Exodus is not specified in terms of a specific year, but it is generally believed to have occurred sometime during the 13th century BCE. The book of Exodus describes how Moses led the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt and how they crossed the Red Sea to escape the pursuing Egyptian army. The Bible does not provide specific dates for these events, but scholars have attempted to determine the timeline based on various clues and historical evidence. Some have suggested dates ranging from the late 16th century BCE to the mid-12th century BCE. However, there is no scholarly consensus on the exact date of the Exodus. In conclusion, inscriptions and artifacts can provide some evidence and context for events and stories in the Bible, but they do not necessarily prove or disprove their accuracy. Inscriptions and artifacts can contribute to our understanding of the historical context of the Bible. Ultimately, the question of the Bible's historical accuracy is a matter of faith and interpretation. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe our channel for more ancient story.